Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is an exciting time. I'm kind of nervous. Um, my name is Adrienne Kennedy. I am from Robinson County, South Lumberton bred. I hope to be South Lumberton here until I'm dead. I am one of the founding members of Seeds of Hope CDC of South Lumberton, and we would like to welcome everybody here for our very first live stream recording to reach the masses on certain issues that face our communities. First, can't go any further until I ask you all to give a moment of silence for our friends and families that were impacted, catastrophically impacted by Hurricane Helen in the mountains. Thank you. As you reflect on that, many of us here did go through Hurricane Matthew and Florence. So not only are we um, sympathetic to what they're going through, we're also empathetic to what they're going through. If you have any idea of how to give, you can go on the North Carolina VOAD site, volunteer organizations active in disaster. You can go on the North Carolina Legal Aid site. You can go on the North Carolina Justice Center site. They have verifiable ways that you can give your time, your cash, any advice or your services. So just keep that in mind as we go because as we know, hurricanes are cyclical, disaster is cyclical, and they're becoming more prevalent and possible. Um, the Western family doing Matthew and Florence, they came here. They came here through air. They had many airplanes to come and deliver to us throughout the county. They had a convoy of U-Hauls that came here and gave to us. We might not know their names, we might not know their faces, but I assure you that their presence was here. So let's try as a collective community to give back and do the same. Just try to strike the conversation up amongst your family, your friends, or your places of worship. Our purpose here today is to understand the connections between the state budget and the issues that we face in our community, especially education. We want to thank the North Carolina Budget and Tax Center for coming here and giving us some very important information on actually what the budget means to us in regards, in comparison to what we think our county budget does or cannot do. We want to also thank the North Carolina Justice Center, Every Child Can See, for coming to discuss the Leandro case and the importance of raising the issue, sticking by public education, public funding for education, quality education for our children. You recording? Come on. We also would like to introduce our first youth group. Shalonda has been working very hard on the youth group. YTC, Youth Take Charge. So these are our beginning founding members, Kayla, Jay, Mikai, Messiah, and Zakai. So yeah, please give the youth a hand. They will be handling our digital part. We hope to see them bloom, blossom, and grow, and be able to start their own business in technology and the digital divide, and definitely be able to represent us well. So if you see them around, pat them on the shoulder, tell them they did a good job, give them some pluses and deltas. House rules, the bathrooms for the men is down and to the left. Is that right, Nick? I'll go to this bathroom. To the left. Oh, and the women's bathroom is also to the left. This is a house of worship where we do reverence God. So we ask the boys to you don't wear your hoodies or your hats in here. And if you see anyone else that comes in as such, also let them know, can you please remove your hats or your hoodies. If you would like to record, you can go on your Facebook Live because this is a live stream. Ms. Vanessa, what you have to say? Oh yeah, we would definitely like to thank Sandy Grove Missionary Baptist Church at 1601 Martin Luther King Drive, where the pastor, leader, encourager is the great Calvin Barnes. That's pronounced his name. We want to thank them for their hospitality. We want to thank them for giving us this space. And they always open their arms to welcome us in to gather anybody, everywhere, all the time. So without further ado, there's no more announcements or concerns. I would like to bring up a young woman that we just met. Sally from the North Carolina Budget and Tax Center. Feel free to take notes. There's an agenda in front of you. We will have a Q&A. Ms. Vanessa and I will probably monitor on Facebook Live. We will be monitoring the Facebook Live. Any help? We will be monitoring the Facebook Live, and we will be bringing questions to you. There's any questions from that Facebook Live. So without any further ado, I'll pass the mic over to Sally.
Thank you. Hey everybody, I'm Sally Hodges-Koppel. I'm a public policy analyst with the North Carolina Budget and Tax Center. I live in Durham, where I was born and raised, and was a Durham public school student for kindergarten through 12th grade. So everything that we're talking about today is very personal to me, as I'm sure it is to you. I'm just glad to be here with you all today. Thank you for having me. Sorry, I have to stand up here with my computer. So I think some of you are already familiar with the Budget and Tax Center, but if we are new to you, we are a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization, and we work to document and analyze fiscal and economic conditions in North Carolina in partnership with community leaders like yourselves and North Carolinians with lived experience of poverty to advance systemic solutions through public policy that drive anti-racist outcomes. So that is what we are about. And our vision is that someday we will have a state where every person can reach their full potential and achieve well-being through the support of trustworthy anti-racist institutions and systems that we all participate in building together. So you are certainly far ways from that right now, but by being together here today, by developing these understandings of how the state budget impacts our communities and our daily lives, that's how we think we can get there together. If you are here, you probably already know that budgets matter and can think of a million reasons why they matter to you. But just to share some examples of how we are directly connected to the state budget, we benefit from the state budget whenever our children attend school or a licensed daycare center, when we attend community college or a university to upgrade our skills, when we visit a state park, museum, or historic site, and when state support comes to counties and therefore offsets the pressure to do things like raise local property taxes. So those things are directly connected to one another. I'm sure you can think of lots more examples in your life. To lay some groundwork and some budget basics, in North Carolina, we have what's called a biennial budget. So it's a 2-year budget. Every 2 years, state lawmakers come together in Raleigh to create that 2-year budget. And that happens in odd years. So for example, in 2023, the General Assembly came together for a long session to establish that budget. And that is the 2023-2025 budget. In even years, like 2024, this year, they have what's called a short session, where they consider revisions to the second year of that budget. So that's what's been going on this year. They came back to Raleigh to try to make revisions to that second year of the budget, and have so far been unsuccessful in passing and enacting legislation. We'll talk more about that. One thing we like to talk about in the budget and tax center are some of the key choices that get made during the budgeting process and how those impact us. So those three key choices are how much is collected in taxes and who pays. We have to have a balanced budget in North Carolina. So we can only spend on public education, on all our community needs, if we have raised that money, that revenue through taxation. Second, we have to decide how we have that revenue, those public dollars, how do we divide those dollars up among many different priorities. A lot of us here care very much about public education, but we know that's not the only thing in our communities that we need to be well. Housing, we need housing, we need good roads. There are many priorities that we can think of. And third, this is kind of, I would say most related to equity, where is spending targeted and to which communities? Who are we directing our spending to, where and why? So we'll go through some of these one by one. To start with taxes, super fun topic. Who pays taxes in North Carolina? We all do. We all pay state and local taxes through a variety of mechanisms, sometimes without even really realizing that that's what we're doing. And actually in North Carolina, when you add all the state and local taxes that we pay, those with the least resources and family income pay the highest percent in taxes in our state when you combine things like income tax, property tax, sales tax all together. Most folks are very surprised to learn this. So in North Carolina, those who make less than about $21,000 a year pay close to 11% of their annual income in state and local taxes, while those in the top 1% who make over almost $700,000 a year pay just 6% in state and local taxes combined. So this is what we sometimes refer to as an upside down tax system. Because when we look at this, it's very intuitive that this is not a particularly just or equitable tax code that we are living under. You might wonder, how does this happen? How does it shake out this way? It's because, again, we're combining all the different forms of taxation that we pay to get that overall chart. So this example is the distribution of sales and excise taxes. So when you buy something at a store, you pay sales tax on it. The sales tax is what's called a regressive tax because it hits lower income families the hardest. So again, the lowest 20% income families pay over 6% of their annual income just in sales tax, while the very wealthiest pay just 1%. Because if you have a low income, you have to spend a lot of your income to meet your needs. You're paying sales tax every time you spend. Whereas if you're higher income, you don't have to spend as much of your income every single year. Property taxes, similar, not quite as regressive as the sales tax, but still it hits lower income families the hardest. And it is not just homeowners, property owners who actually pay property tax. A landlord might be the one cutting the check, but some of that cost of paying a tax gets passed on to someone who's renting. So when property taxes go up in our local communities to make up for state revenue that's not coming our way, that impacts everyone, not just folks who own property or own a home. And this is why the state income tax is such an important tool to raise revenue in a more equitable way. Because with the personal income taxes, and this actually includes, I believe, both personal income and perhaps corporate income. I should double check myself on that. But those making less than about, again, $21,000 a year pay about 0.5% of their annual income just in personal income taxes, while those at the very top, again, making almost $700,000 a year, pay about 3.5% in personal income tax in North Carolina. So this is considered a more progressive form of taxation, because as your income goes up, you pay a higher percent of your income in this particular tax. And that's why it's such a problem that North Carolina is moving away from the personal income tax as a source of revenue. You may be aware that we'll talk more about this, but we used to have a graduated taxation system, so there'd be a higher tax on income above a certain level and a lower tax on income below that level. Now it's a flat tax, which makes the system more regressive, and it's flat, and they're decreasing the rate over time. Eventually it'll get down to just 2.5% under current law. So as they have made it flat, as lawmakers have reduced the rate, we're losing out on this source of more equitable progressive revenue and creating greater pressure on our counties, on our local elected officials to have to make up the difference somehow. Again, when you combine all this together, that's where you get this overall upside down tax code that we have in North Carolina. And this chart just visually illustrates what I was talking about with the reduction in the personal income tax rate. Back in 2022, it was up at 5%. Before that, it was even higher. And now, if certain revenue triggers are met, which we can talk more about, it will eventually decline to just 2.5% in 2029, and then stay there for now. You can also interrupt me at any time. I think we're leaving room for questions at the end, but if something really catches your eye and you need to ask a quick question, please feel free to do that. I should have said that earlier. Similar story with the corporate income tax. So the corporate income tax is currently set to be eliminated in North Carolina by the year 2030. So after that year, large multinational corporations with millions of dollars in profit will pay 0 state income taxes in North Carolina. And that's going to cost our state billions of dollars every year. I think it's $2 billion by 2030, and that number will continue to grow in the years after. One thing that's important to know about the state corporate income tax is that this is not a tax that is paid by small businesses. Most small businesses pay their tax through a different means. This really only applies to, again, those super large, highly profitable corporations who certainly have the resources to be able to contribute to our state and our communities through this tax. And when the tax is eliminated, we have partners who have shared analysis with us that shows that 9 out of every $10 that we'll lose from eliminating this tax will actually flow to out-of-state folks, to shareholders, corporate executives who live out of state, who do not live in North Carolina. And that small portion that is lost to in-state residents, again, is lost to the very wealthiest residents who own that stock, who benefit when the tax is eliminated. So eliminating us does nothing to help most North Carolinians, and will actually hurt our communities when we have less money for our schools, for affordable housing, for all the priorities we've talked about. So this is a really short-sighted policy that we're trying to raise awareness about and actually have a petition going to try to change this. Well, we can talk more about that too. Just to visualize the scale, I know some of this information is a bit of a downer, but we will end on a hopeful note, don't worry. Just visualize the scale of the state revenue that we're going to be losing from these tax cuts. This chart, you don't have to worry about the colors too much, but this combines the revenue that's going to be lost from those personal income tax cuts and the state corporate income tax cut over time. And as you see, it just continues to grow and grow, eventually reaching over $13 billion by fiscal year 2031. It's not that far in the future. That of course sounds like a lot of money, but it can be hard to imagine how much is that really, you know? And so for perspective, our state annual budget, the general fund, the kind of core part of the budget that funds education, health, our whole state budget is about $30 billion. And we're going to lose 13 billion lost potential revenue. So that 13 billion could accomplish quite a lot when you think about the fact that our whole budget is 30 billion. And again, you know, sometimes when we hear about tax cuts, we can think, oh, okay, that's nice. I would like a tax cut. That sounds very nice. But whenever you hear that, and this is a point that's made in our candidate guide that you have, it's always important to ask the question, well, who's really going to benefit from that cut? What's the breakdown in the distribution of benefits? And when you break it down, the richest 20% of North Carolinians will receive almost 2/3 of the benefit of these tax cuts, whereas the bottom 80%, the vast majority of North Carolinians, receive just about 30% of the benefit. So it is policies that, instead of building broader opportunity, are concentrating wealth amongst the already privileged wealthy few. Okay, so that's a lot about taxes, but I also want to talk about this question of how do we divide up dollars among priorities. So this pie chart represents that 30 billion state general fund budget that we were talking about earlier. And as you can see, this big green portion is for K-12 education. It's almost 40% of our state budget. And then the dark blue, that 19%, is higher education, our universities, community colleges systems. So if you combine those two together, our state budget is more than half dedicated to public education. It's an enormous part of what our state does and has done historically to build opportunity in our communities. I don't think I have this chart in this presentation, but somewhere the Budget and Tax Center has a map of every county in North Carolina and who the largest employer is. And the vast majority of counties, the public school system is either the largest employer or the second largest employer. So it's the foundation of our local economies. So you can see that we dedicate a lot of our budget to education, but you also want to ask, but is that an adequate amount? Are we accomplishing what we want to accomplish when we are dedicating that portion of our budget? And I'm sure we all can think of lived experiences looking around our communities, especially in recent years, and sensing that there is something wrong. You just have to open a newspaper and see that there is something not right with our system. So these are some headlines, probably hard to see, but you know, we see shortages of bus drivers. We see teacher pay lagging behind the national average. In Durham, the public schools closed for, I think, multiple days in a row because teachers were rightly protesting an increase in pay that ended up getting revoked. And there was a lot of anger towards the county about that. But again, we're trying to show this ultimately connects back to the state. And when the state is not supporting our county officials are kind of between a rock and a hard place. And I'm sure you've also heard a lot about childcare programs in North Carolina and how they've been facing a funding cliff for quite a while now. And the state has not stepped up to meet that need. I know the next speakers, I think, are going to talk a lot more about Leandro, but I wanted to share this with you all when we talk about having enough resources to meet our needs or spending enough to meet our needs. I think this chart is very helpful. The bottom line shows the revenue triggers that lawmakers have said, if we meet this revenue threshold, then we're gonna enact even deeper tax cuts. So they're basically saying, that's all the resources we think our state needs to accomplish our goals. And you might rightly ask, is that really enough? And so the blue line above shows the estimated forecast of state spending over time if you were to maintain just our current levels of public goods and services, and if you added the Leandro plan to it. If you kept current levels of services and you met your constitutional obligation to children, that top line is what it would cost. And as you can see, there is quite a big gap between the revenue that lawmakers say is going to be enough and the line of what it would cost to just stay where we are and add Leandro. Okay, and now this last question, which is it's really woven throughout everything we've already been talking about. But how do we decide in our budgeting process where we target our spending, to which communities, to whom? And what we've been seeing over the last really decade or so is targeting attention to the wealthy few in North Carolina. So again, those scheduled tax cuts are going to cost our state over $13 billion. And by comparison, the cost to fully fund the Leandro plan, at least at the time that this chart was made, might be a little dated, Sarah might have better information, is about $6.9 billion. So we could, again, accomplish really wonderful things, policies like Leandro that have equity at their core, that ensure everyone has a sound basic education and achieves that by specifically focusing on communities who have been left behind historically and under our status quo. But instead of targeting our spending to those communities and to that plan, so much of the efforts in Raleigh have been focused on these tax cuts for corporations and for the very, very wealthiest in our state. Finally, wanted to share, I'm sure you've already gotten from this conversation a very good sense of some of the threats that public education is facing in North Carolina right now, but just to get specific about a few of them. One very timely threat that our public schools are facing is the expiration of federal COVID era funding. So when the pandemic hit, the federal government responded by sending a lot of money to school districts that could be used for, immediate things like protective equipment, like the kind of more immediate needs of the staying safe in the pandemic. But it was also funding to, make up learning loss or to support students recovering from the time that they were in school during the pandemic. That funding is about to expire, and so far the state has not really put forth a plan for how to make up for that funding or how to ensure that school districts don't experience this huge drop-off. And this map basically shows that the failure by North Carolina leaders to replace that funding is going to be most acutely blocking Eastern North Carolina schools from educational opportunities. As the color gets darker, that means that the federal funding made up a greater share of that district's spending in a given school year. So in Robeson County, federal funding was, I think, almost 14% of the county's school funding in that year. So when it's gone, that'll be a huge drop-off. Whereas some counties, the federal funding was only a little bit of their budget, so it won't hurt as bad to lose it. So that's one thing that's going on. And then, as I'm sure we'll also talk about a lot more this afternoon, the expansion of private school vouchers in North Carolina is also a great threat to public education. Years ago, the voucher program was started as only available to very low-income families, and over time has been expanded to be a universal program. So even very wealthy families whose kids have always been private school kids, who have never attended public schools, even those families will now be eligible to receive state dollars to pay their private school tuition. And that is going to be very costly to the state over time. So we're increasing costs while we're cutting taxes for the rich, while we're not funding Leandro, and it just kind of adds up to a really unsustainable situation. Yes.
How will the impact? How will the effects of the current hurricanes impact the budget?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question. My understanding is that they're still estimating what the total cost will be, but it is in the billions of dollars. Because it was such an enormous disaster, there's a lot of federal funding that will be available. But I think one lesson we've learned at the Budget and Tax Center from Matthew and Florence over time is that this kind of recovery takes years and a very sustained investment over time. And that kind of sustenance does require a state commitment. So it will certainly impact the state budget. And we certainly believe that that's just further evidence that we cannot continue on this tax cutting path that we have been on, that it's entirely unsustainable because it is going to be very costly to rebuild in Western North Carolina. Yeah. And finally, we've talked a lot about the tax cuts, but that is kind of the third major threat that public education or public schools are facing in our state budget climate right now. Okay, so back to our little roadmap to close this out. Again, we are in an even year, 2024, so it's a short session. It's considering modifications to the second year of the budget. But as of today, we are 3 months into the new fiscal year, July, August, September, we're now in October, and lawmakers have still not passed that budget. This is kind of becoming a pattern over time, late budgets, no budgets, very dysfunctional, very disruptive to school systems. What lawmakers have done this year so far, they put a few very unpopular and harmful budget changes, namely school voucher expansion, into an unrelated bill called HB 10. That is an anti-immigrant bill kind of designed to sow division amongst North Carolinians, and that will decrease trust in law enforcement, and that will also increase costs for law enforcement. So an unrelated and also bad bill that they have inserted spending changes into. So it's not a budget, they're kind of calling it a mini budget, but it's not, a responsible, comprehensive assessment of where we are as a state, what communities need, and a spending plan to achieve that. It's a very fragmented, kind of chaotic way to be using public dollars. So again, this is kind of just continuing a trend of what's an increasingly broken state budget process, lacking transparency. It shuts out public input and meaningful debate. They often introduce and then vote on these bills very quickly, so there's really not time to understand what's in them, even for organizations that's our role. And it prioritizes special interests, such as corporations and wealthy families who would like a break on their private school tuition. But there is hope, and there are things that we can do. One thing that we are doing at the Budget and Tax Center is trying to stop the elimination of the state corporate income tax. We have a petition going right now. We've collected thousands of signatures, and we have a really high goal for how many folks want to sign this. And we will deliver it to state lawmakers so that they know that their constituents are not supportive of the path that we are on right now. So there's a QR code here. I'm sure somewhere in our voter guide, there's also a link to the petition somewhere, but really encourage you to sign that if you haven't already and to share around widely with any North Carolina resident. And then you have a printout, so you don't actually need this. But this is our Freedom to Thrive voter guide that we created for the first time this year. And it has a lot of good information, but it also has some examples of questions that you can ask candidates for public office to understand their stance on some of the budget and tax issues that we've talked about today. It's really good to know where your lawmakers or elected officials stand on these things, and you might actually be able to provide them information that they did not know already about where things stand on budget and tax. That was all I had, but I think we do have time for some questions or just conversation if you want to share observations, things that you're seeing in Robinson County. Would love to talk about that with you. I can pass the mic if that helps. But any questions or thoughts or comments?
Tell us a little bit about, do you know anything about rebuild housing? Is that part of state money or federal money?
Like rebuilding housing from the hurricane?
Right.
I do not know a ton about how that breaks down. But yes, we have the other policy analyst at Budget and Tax Center. He knows a lot more than I do about that particular question, so I can try to ask if he can provide more information.
My question is, why is it taking so long for these people to get their houses built or repaired? Because I got friends that's been out of their house 30 years. Now, can you explain that?
I don't think I can. This is from Matthew, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah. I think there's been a lot of reporting on why like state aid has been so slow to go out. I don't know, Sarah, if you know more, or Adrian. Can you speak more about why it's taken so long for families to get the resources to rebuild their homes from Matthew?
We just had an online conversation about this topic Thursday night, and Adrian and Shalonda were talking about all of the different factors, right? Structural racism being at the core.
Right.
And they were able to speak directly to folks in Asheville, working with the community out there to tell them how to advocate, right? But yeah, the short answer is, you know, the storm comes, and then our policy makers and our lawmakers get to choose, you know, winners and losers, and which communities are going to be made whole and which don't. And if it's any reflection of their agenda, you know, that tells us all we need to know about.
Right.
who
And
they're
it's
working-
the
who they
same,
think they're working for.
it will be the same issues across the board. So environmentally, economically, and on the same education base in relation to the HB 10. Not only does the HB 10 affect immigrants, but it affects the Black community. It's a funding diversion. So it's robbery,
Yep.
in a sense, and it increases segregation. That was the same thing with the money allocated for our rebuild. And it's not hard to see that the thing about it is we are all able to use our senses. So if you ride around in this neighborhood, right across the street, if you look at your school, at our schools, and we say we deserve better or it can be better, then you go to another neighborhood and their schools are better. Or if you can count on your one hand how many homes have been rebuilt in a 5-mile radius from the railroad tracks to Fairmont, and you go to West Lumberton or East Lumberton and the numbers start to increase and the homes look a little different. It's the same discrimination. It's the same expectation that we're not going to do anything, we're not going to say anything. And that does not mean, someone said one day, that doesn't mean that we should be treated like that because we're not doing anything. And so it's the same, what she's saying is the HB 10, the fund, it affects us in the funding diversion way. Same thing with the money that was allocated for rebuild. It increases segregation.
Yep.
Same thing for the money that was, for rebuild. And then there's a distribution of resource inequality. I mean, if you go home and you lay down and you say, I wonder why that person's house don't look like that, or I wonder why our side of town doesn't look like that. It's the same economically, education, and environmentally. So when we ask the question, we also got to be able to come up with some solutions of our own selves of what we would demand and do. Or else it's just gonna be another cycle of, mismanagement and disbursement of funds. If you know when you have a piggy bank and you're putting your money in it, right? You're saving it for a rainy day. And then when you turn it upside down, right, and you're expecting all of the money to come out, but the probabilities of a quarter coming out, a dime coming out, and you're waiting for a bigger pot for your rainy day situation. So the government has a top-heavy administration. They turned the money upside down and said, we're gonna hire all of these people up here to manage a community or communities further south. And then by the time we get what's called crumbs. And Angus raised a point one day about 2 years ago. He said, when you start asking, you need to ask for direct funding, because direct funding means we have control of how that money is spent in a bigger way, instead of us allowing it to go through the different bureaucracies and municipalities to where we can't use the money to fix X amount of houses. But we gotta put in an ask of direct funding. The language definitely has to change.
As opposed to block grant.
As opposed to
Now, I'm dealing now with a lady in her house, with 4 ladies. And I know when they fill their applications out. Well, my friend, this is a friend thing, this is the good old boy stuff. I'm out there and I know. I'm gonna put your house back and fix my friend's house.
Right.
Now, you're dealing with government money here, and it shouldn't be that way.
Right.
And I think that we, as people, as a black race of people, should stand up and be counted and not let them take our money and put it here when it should be here. This lady's been out of her house for 5 years, okay? And I get emotional when I think about it. And I'm not no rich person. I'm struggling like anybody else. But she'll call me and say, Miss Carter, I need this, I need that. Well, that's my friend. If I can help her, I'm gonna help her. But that's not fair to her. And I know that houses have been built in Fairmount and in Lumberton, because I'm all over Robertson County.
Amen.
And you get an application this month, I get one next month. Your house is built, and mine, I'm still sitting here. That's not right. We need to come together as a black race of people and get something done about this. This is our money that they're using.
It's our money.
Because we pay taxes too. I pay property taxes, I pay federal taxes, I pay state taxes. So that's what I'm suggesting, that we come together and get this stuff done. Because it's not fair to our people to sit here and not have a house, and you sitting over here and you got a house. That's not right. It's not right. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we need to do something about it.
That's right.
Not talk about it, we need to do something about
Sally, my name is Angus Thompson. And Sally, first of all, thank you for that presentation. There was a lot in there. And one of the things that you said is that everybody pays taxes. I wanted you to expound on that because there are people who insinuate that poor people don't pay taxes. And I want you to expound on it again because you would not only sales taxes, but would you sort of expound on again, everybody pays taxes and poor people pay taxes.
Pay more, actually.
it. Would you expound on it?
Yeah, I mean, you're right, but there's some like myth busting that has to happen. There's a lot of rhetoric in our society around like who gives, who takes, who's deserving, who's undeserving. And so that's why I really love these charts, which maybe are nerdy, but that show the facts of we all contribute. As you said, this is our money. We paid it through sales tax every time we buy stuff. We pay it through property tax, whether we're buying or renting. We pay our income tax every year. We all contribute, and when you add it up, do the math, those who have the least are paying the most as a share of their income. As a share of their income. And so it's an upside down system, it's backwards, and I think we just have to, unfortunately, repeat and repeat and repeat the message until we can replace this current narrative that has been around for a very long time. So it'll probably take a very long time to replace. But yes, you're absolutely right.
I have two questions. Well, one is a question, and the other is a statement. I serve as the Archbishop for Universal Center of God Worldwide Services, Executive Director for South London Development Association. And with those two things being in mind, first thing, since this is voting season, are there any specific questions that's on the ballot box dealing with this? So when people go in to vote, they can have in their mind, oh, I've heard her say, here's one, here's two, here's three issues that I need to choose to address. And after you address it, then I'll make my statement that's dealing with the housing, etc.
That's right.
Yes. So I wish in North Carolina that we had the ability to vote directly on some of these policies. But unfortunately, I don't know of any thing on the ballot besides candidates, who are making these decisions, especially our state lawmakers in Raleigh. And that's why I hope this voting guide is helpful, because there are questions you can ask candidates ahead of time to know where they stand. This is a totally nonpartisan document. We're a nonpartisan organization, but every lawmaker deserves to be asked, what do you think? Like, will you promise to keep the corporate income tax? Will you promise to pause this decrease in the personal income tax? Are you committed to correcting our upside down tax code and using that revenue, our money, to invest in our homes, in our schools? Because, the people are the ultimate boss in a way, right? You hire your lawmaker. They should be accountable to you. And that's a different conversation, but there is a certain lack of accountability right now in our state budget process, so.
Well, the only way to address that is, like it's been done in California, Maryland, and other states. We have to push for a referendum to be put on the ballot. That's the way you do it. If there's a referendum on the ballot where the public comes and says, we want X, Y, Z, and you get enough votes, then that's how something comes into law. Because if you wait on John Block, who comes before you when it's time for elections and promise you everything for the child of God, then you go after the voting time has passed, you're right back to the same thing. I think grassroots people can come and find out who represents them in the community. Then once you find out who, then the next question is, Mr. X, I want to know, how can we put a referendum on that? If it's Lindo or whatever topic it is, how do we get that on the ballot? Because otherwise you keep going through the same thing. Now, I'm not going to hold your time up. Now I want to address the situation with the housing. It took me 7 years to get a house built. Part of that is because the same issue that I brought up before when we went to thriving communities. You have two issues that's going on. Yes, you have the racism and all that other stuff. But guess what? There's more important than that. I know you ain't gonna like what I'm saying. But you know what it is? Bureaucracy. When you have too many hands in the pocket, you gotta go through crossing too many T's, dotting too many I's. It causes crime, number one. I'm talking about crime among those people who make the decisions. Because what happens is, instead of it being an easy thing of just addressing what your needs are, you gotta jump through this hoop, that hoop, who likes that committee, who doesn't like that committee, are you this, are you that, before you can get anything done. Now with the housing, I'm gonna tell you specifically what I know. In Robeson County, when they started building houses, why did it take so long? First of all, they did not use contractors. We're talking about prime contractors. Y'all probably know black general contractors. But how many of you knew that for building houses and floods, etc., being a general contractor doesn't get it? You have to be a prime contractor. What is a prime contractor? People who have millions of dollars as contractors. Just being 100,000, your little 200,000, that won't get it. To be a prime contractor. Well, when they got prime contractors involved, they found out that prime contractors were coming in, but they wasn't doing the work. So what they had to do, they had to take them contracts from them and rebid them out again. It took almost 4 years to straighten that mess out. Once they finally got prime contractors in place and got rid of the problems that they was having at first through this bureaucracy, my house was built in 6 months, opposed to 7 years. So what we have to do again, we as the public, we as the people, we have to, first of all, when you talk to these people that's doing the houses, who is the decision maker in the dollars for your area? Who's the one that called the shot? As the man said, the buck stopped what? Here. That's what you want to know. Who is that person that calls the shots with getting these houses built? Or whatever we're trying to do, education, tax, whatever. Once you know who that decision maker is, then you can begin to caucus and come together and stop the bureaucracy. It's just too much of it.
That's right.
When we went to, and I'm gonna close on this, in November of last year, we went with Thriving Communities. $90 billion they was talking about. Why is it after going to a committee and staying there for 3 days, Mr. Angus Thompson, Vanessa, Ms. Kennedy, all of us that went, why haven't we gotten $1 of that? Since last year. You know why? Too much bureaucracy. I raised so much sand about it. October 1st, they changed the rules to eliminate most of that bureaucracy. So I'm just saying to you again, you can keep meeting until doomsday, until Christ comes if you want. Until we, as a people, stop the bureaucracy. If we want to meet, find out what the issue is, and as a small group, we can do great things. Because you hold a person, it's like a pastor. Hold the feet to the fire. If the people won't do right, then they gotta go. If you do that. So God bless you. Thank you.
I need to say something else. Thank you.
We got time now, so we have a few.
I'm just gonna say 2 things. One thing about the rebuild North Carolina is when they first sent these people down here to do this work, the man from Tennessee told me, he says, I will do your work, because I told him they couldn't tear my house down. He said, I will do your work, but every dime that I save goes in my pocket. Come on now. You don't tell me when he told me that. And I went with him to Lowe's. I made sure he spent every dime of that money.
Amen.
I did do it. Yes, because the money was allotted for my house, not for your pocket.
Okay.
And there's a lot of that going on too.
I just want to brought up referendum and bureaucracy. And I think that you're right on the point. First of all, I want to try to answer. How do you get a referendum on the ballot? And the way to get a referendum on the ballot is you gotta go through your general assembly.
Yeah.
And the way to get that on the ballot through your general assembly is you got to change the folks we send to the right.
There you go.
It's just that simple. But you won't get a referendum on the ballot without the general assembly. Even on a local, your local delegation.
Yeah.
If it's a local referendum, if it's a state referendum, but the general assembly, even for a local bill, it still has to pass, through the general assembly, but they'll support the local, delegations, recommended. On the garage, you're exactly right. I've heard the word from Sally, talk about things being systemic and being institutionalized. Policies are really made up there.
Amen.
And, my plumber told me water ain't the only thing that runs downhill. You know what I mean? And there's some stuff up there that ain't worth a darn for us. But either way, but it starts up there. And the way, and these policies, policies are made for intended results, to bring about intended results. And so, you're exactly right. We have to change the bureaucracy because policies, and think about folks up there. When I say up there, I'm talking about in Raleigh and in DC. They got jobs. And if they don't write a whole lot of mess, they figure they ain't got no job. So a lot of this stuff that you see running downhill is people thinking that, they just busy work for them. But for us, it's shellac.
We want to thank Sally from the North Carolina Board of Tax staff. And I just want to make a brief note that she mentioned something about corporate tax. If you don't know the language is too strong or, putting it all together, just look at the corporations that are on outside of town that's been here, like Quickie, graphic packaging. And then we've been here long enough, just go across the tracks. I remember when behind Nichols was all swamp water. And my grandma kept saying, there's no way they can build over there, that's swampland. But they made it possible for communities and hospitals and banks to build over there. When a corporation does not pay taxes, it affects our infrastructure. Companies do not want to come on this side of town because corporate tax avoidance, corporations that don't pay taxes and come back into our county, does not help with the infrastructure. Companies don't want to come over here to our side of town, but we already think about FEMA as flood path, flood zone, and floodway. So if you go on a Zillow or a real estate app, you see that big X, that's the indication to corporations, no, we don't need to move over there. And corporate tax avoidance also affects your public health. You have to go across town to the cancer center. You have to go across town to the dialysis. And we're here, right, suffering or going through our health journey, but we have to make transportation. So all, like he said, water is not the only thing that goes downhill. The burden becomes on us or on our family members to pay for us to get over there, to wait, to go into our, rearrange our time. We might have people that work that have to take off from work to go, because we're not in proximity of those healthcare facilities. That's all because corporations are not, like Sally was saying, just reiterate what she's saying, they're not holding corporations accountable to pay taxes. It's taking money away from our county. Right now, we're going to be having lunch provided by, your favorite chefs. What is it? Melissa Pittman's chef. It's your favorite chef?
Your chef's favorite chef.
Yeah, your chef's favorite chef. Your chef's favorite chef. I'm 49 years old, and her and Shalonda kept saying, we're gonna provide some charcuterie. I had no idea what they were, but they started letting the ingredients in them, so I was with it. But Help Yourself, we want to thank her for providing the catering. She's been busy all week. She helped with the homecoming. She helped with the client from the homecoming. And I was talking to her all night long, and she was like, tell me whatever you need me to do. She's always flexible. So we want to thank her publicly, give her a shout out. So, yeah, we'll have lunch, and then we'll reconvene at 12:15 and talk about education, what that looks like for our children.
That's why, right?
Facebook Live, like Q&A, was there any Q&A?
Oh, she was recording. Go ahead and close your report now.
Perfect.
Let's bow our heads and bless the Lord. Lord, we first thank you for this assembly of citizens who are here today to do your work, God's work. And then we bless and ask that you bless this food, the hands that prepared it, and those who made it. And we ask that it might be used for the nourishment and for the health of our bodies. For Christ's sake. Amen.
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 Miss Vanessa, did you ever get a card of that paper? Did you ever get that? I know that.
Now, Melissa, you're not serving us, right? You got to get us.
Okay. I'll get that down here. Down here. Okay. Till around it or whatever. Okay. Okay, good. All right. What you say about your
Thank you, Melissa. Leave you around.
I'm starting. Yeah, that's a lot, and then for them to understand. It's kind of hard to.
Wait a minute now. These are, these are.
Oh, Lord, thank you. Oh, where are these? Oh, no, it's all right. What favorite? I got you. Hey, hold on. Hold on, one second. Hey.
Right there. See this little stand right there with
They're so good. I appreciate it. Yes. Thank you.
Right on top, brother.
We gotta form, we will have to form some type of small caucus, you know, and you got, that's right, and it starts with, and it's hard to say, 'cause you commune with the people that are locally here, and because of that. Yeah, anytime you're dealing with people on a local community, the problem that you run into is creating friction. You know, but you're gonna have to create friction, and then all of us come in the world, it came from friction. It's gonna be friction. That's right. That's right. That's right. That's right. 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 So that's what's gonna have to happen. Yeah.
Well, that's good.
And when you do it, you gotta almost point back to the book of Hebrews. You know, this chastisement is coming on you because
Thank you,
this is
Sally.
the only way we can do it.
So well, I appreciate your work.
at least put the people in a position of saying, well, I gotta do what's right, because if I don't, that small group right there, they coming from my job, they coming from me, they coming for everything. Then they say, I don't wanna do it, but because of what they're saying.
And help our communities out, so it's really good. Work. Yeah, I would do it. Yeah. There's a lot for a kid to come out on a Saturday. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna get y'all some money. Oh, yeah, I was just thinking Oh, you're talking about oh, yeah.
Chicken on Sunday.
It's an art.
Your friend. I'll be there, you know, I'll be my little corner over there, because you know, I still need where musicians are. No, is that what you did? Oh, you never noticed that? I said, I don't know where the musicians are.
I don't blame you. Yeah. The duo.
I'm going out and out. All right. So you know what it is. Where you at now, Amy? Fairfield. Oh, I'm here.
A little while.
I'll talk about food. I know.
That's all I hear.
We didn't talk about food. I'll talk about food. I want to talk about that. I was straight up talking about food. I don't know what you're talking about. I missed that.
Oh, no, I just get my salad.
It's the first time I've been to Yeah, it's yeah, make sure we got that. Okay. We got more. How easy it is. Oh, great. Okay, well, we'll make it. That's not really good. Great. Did you take it? Oh, okay. Yeah. Some people be like, I still tell it. I make when I did my thing, you know what? I had used I like the gardenia. And try those two. Is there the spray that's gardenia, there's no white bag. And I just get a simple sauce. I never got that's all I did. But I had to the barbecue sauce and jelly. As long as the jelly has pectin and not jelly. Pectin versus jelly. So you have to have that on. Yeah, so I had well, yeah, that's good too, but you know, I'm not a cook. And I did yeah. And I really please do. Because I don't mind answering questions. Like, I don't mind, you know, like, it's just a matter of who the message is. I love yeah.
Good old boy. Good shot. But they're giving them and let them
Put it in their pocket. They won't put it in yours. But none of that stuff can change. Unless you change.
They have a hard time working with something that they care about a lot, so that's why I've ended up with nonprofits. I try to do work for like companies, and they really like it, but I would personally have a hard time selling something.
I'm not really. And you know what? And you start to back, but it's not efficient.
That's right.
We the leaders.
We the people.
We the people.
That's why the Constitution says that. We the people. You talking about when we formed the town cluster group way back then? Yeah. Huh? Of course. You know who's right? Of course, I said. Yeah. Okay. I know that now.
My daughter right. Green right. Whole time. She right. Right. Somebody else raised it right. You know what I'm
I wanted to know this like year-long fellowship that lets you teach abroad. They have this program where they hire English teachers. And like I said, Hey, got cheese? Yes.
No, that's the most popular person in the community. Most popular. After that, I mean, on the local level, you got city council. That's the government for the city, and then for the county commission, and then the state, of course, for the legislature. But there's a lot to be done. For a whole lot of, but if you don't have, yeah. Right. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
It's just so sad. We've got people like that. Okay, I guess she's ready to reconvene. I'll have to call you back. They were getting ready to reconvene this recording, then after that I'll be free to talk.
Gotta go, I got nothing here to do. Okay. So y'all good? I'm gonna go. Let me bring it out.
Ready pre-late?
You running?
It never stopped.
Where's the?
That's all. That's not what you need.
I just need to look at Sarah, Sally gave you a little
Oh.
synopsis.
I thought you meant what they owe us.
In 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, this is Adrian again from Seeds of Hope. We want to thank everybody. We hope you enjoyed your lunch provided by your chef's favorite chef, Melissa Pittman. We're going to move into the next part of our workshop, which is on quality education, sound and basic deserving education for our children. And more specifically, the Leandro case, which should always remain on the ballot. Always should we be raising our voices to get our money back. This packet that was provided to you by Every Child NC does have some pertinent information when you're talking to your lawmakers. Like Anya said, we're thinking about what should we say in terms of referendums. In terms of referendums, this should be a household conversation. Every time somebody calls, every time I'm talking, somebody calls. It's funny. So next up, we will have conversation in regards to the court ruling for Leandro versus the state of North Carolina. And this heavily relates to what Sally was talking about, the budget. So she mentioned that the COVID funds would be exhausted. So those services that your children are already receiving, whether in an abundant or nil way, they won't receive. She also mentioned HB 10 that's out that diverts funding from our schools for our children. And now we're going to add the absence and the inaccountability of our governor and his lack of effort to push Leandro. So we'll have Shalonda and welcome Sarah, Shalonda Regan, who is the education chair of Seeds of Hope, and Sarah from Every Child NC. Shalonda also has a tutoring company called Crown Blossoms. So she is a small business owner. She's impacted by this in 3 different ways because she sees every day what the lack of resources, self and supported individualized services that should be in the school are not there. Shalonda gets to see what that looks like for our children through Crown Blossom. So we thank you for standing the gap, being a warrior for that. So we'll call up Shalonda and Sarah now.
You want us to just
Is
sit?
it Q&A?
You want us to just go there?
Is he Q&A or we'll call up Angus as well. He can be facilitate us the conversation. Yeah, come on up.
And she said, don't drag me.
Don't drag your chair.
Don't drag your chair.
All right, so, ooh, I sound very loud.
That's great.
But, first of all, thank you all for being out here today. I really appreciate, the fact that the youth have taken time out of their Saturday. As Jay has explained to me, he could be asleep. So I really do appreciate, them coming out. And if I could just really quickly say something about Youth Take Charge, I appreciate, Seeds of Hope for just basically saying, sure, you can do that. You can have a youth group that basically teaches our youth. The ages is 14 to 24, and I'll give a really brief on why. At the age of 14, you can kind of download all the information, and it's 4 years before you're actually set to vote. So we understand our civic duties and engagements prior to us having the responsibility to go out and vote, and we have those 4 years, and we're making the impact on our youth, and we are educating them to make educated votes, not just voting because they are a certain race or voting because they're from a certain place, but literally voting because they understand that this is how this is impacted, this is how my family will be impacted, and this is how everyone else moving forward will be impacted by my single mark on a ballot. So that's the purpose of YPC, and that's why the age ranges from 14, and then it ends at 24, because that's around the age when people are graduating college, they're starting families, and if you have all of those years of understanding the importance of your civic engagement, then you'll make a positive impact on what it is that you do moving forward. So that's where the age comes from. That's the purpose of the group. And now we'll get into why we're here at this table. I'm so glad to be joined not only by an original plaintiff of the Leandro case, Mr. Angus Thompson, but also Ms. Sarah Montgomery from Every Child NC, who, you know, guys, if you'll just go to the Every Child NC website, which we will surely give you the information for, you will see there's so much information. There's so many guides that you can add to your toolkit, so that you can go out and have educated conversations and engage people and allow for them to understand why the funding for Leandro is so important and why we as a community should be standing up for public education rights for our children, okay? So without further ado, we'll get into the conversation that needs to be had. I would like for, if we could please, start with and then end with. So we'll start with Ms. Sarah, basically explaining the work that Every Child Can See in the Justice Center has done to push this move towards public education. If we can just talk about that work that you all have done so far, talk about the dangers or the what has been going on with the public school vouchers and the private school vouchers and, you know, all of that stuff. If we can get into that conversation, and then if we can kind of have Mr. Angus, who I just love to hear speak anyway, but if we can get him just to talk about pretty much what the Leandro case meant then, and then what it means now. And I can kind of round the conversation off with what it is that I do get to see on a day-to-day basis, Monday through Thursday, as I'm sitting with children from my community, South Lumberton, and other communities too, but most of them come from South Lumberton. And we just talk about like the effects and what I don't see and what it is that we need, and why we should still be pushing for this case. So we can start with Ms. Sarah.
Thanks, Shalonda. And I just want to say what an honor it is to be here with you all today. A little bit about me, Sarah Montgomery, works at the North Carolina Justice Center, and I support the Every Child NC statewide coalition. Collectively, we are advocating for resource equity for public school students, and we organize around the Leandro case. And I have learned everything that's important and worth knowing about Leandro because of these people that I'm sitting up here with. Mr. Thompson is such an incredible leader, a mentor, and truly just like embodies the spirit of what this case is about and why it's so important for us as really one of our most important civil rights cases in North Carolina. And then Seeds of Hope with the leadership of Shalonda and Adrian and Scream and so many others is really how we move that work forward, right? How do we force that progress forward? We know what we're up against, and Sally, I really appreciate it, because information can be power, right? I was thinking, because there were a couple slides that you shared, where it's almost like you have that fight or flight response. You know, sometimes you also freeze, because you're just like, wow, that's a lot. These harms, right? What we see every day in our community is by design. This is because somebody has an agenda. Somebody is making political choices about where we will and won't spend our money, right? Our money.
Right.
And you can either take that information and shut down, and we all know a lot of people, that's too much, right? That's politics. I don't want to go near that, right? But a lot of us with that information, that's like fuel for that fire that we have, right? And we choose to fight. And Seeds of Hope, and everybody here in this room, we're here to fight, right? We take that information in, we take a breath, we find our people, right? We figure out where are the leaders, where are the helpers, what can we do about this? And so every time Lindsay is trying to answer that question, what can we do about this? And I just want to say how deeply grateful I am for the movement, the Leandro movement, the movement for resource equity, and to ensure that every child in North Carolina has exactly what they need to meet their full potential. And that fight was born here. That fight was born right here in Robeson County. And back in the dark days, Sally was talking about the harm that was happening in Durham Public Schools, and I come from Durham. I'm a Durham Public School parent. My husband teaches in the Durham Public School, middle school. And those were really tough days. You know, our employees were really hurting. The community was kind of in a crisis mode. And we were holding a community forum in February with a bunch of the other community leaders and parents trying to figure this out. And we invited Ms. Shalonda Regan to come from Lumberton to join us in Durham and to be a bearer, a messenger of hope. Because she came to talk to us about what Leandro means and why it matters not just for Robeson County and children here, but for children in Durham, for children in every single of our 115 public school districts across the state. And that's hope that's born here. And that's hope that that lives here and that grows every day, every time we have a conversation like this, every time we bring new people into this fight. So I am just deeply grateful for the work that people are sticking with, and we know we're up against a lot. We're going to talk a little bit more. I want us to learn from Mr. Thompson. This is a 30-year-long battle. Leandro turns 30 this year. We had an event earlier this year where we marked the anniversary of Brown v. Board, which turned 70 this year. And similarly, right? Once we, once Brown was passed, well, now the question is, well, what do those resources look like? And that's where Leandro comes in, right? It's part of that whole family of struggle, right? And we started the year, this year, by turning out hundreds of advocates. Many of us in the room were there. We showed up at the state Supreme Court to condemn the attack against Leandro that they were busy working on, stripping voters of their rights and trying to strip public school children from their constitutionally protected right to public education, right? So we showed up, we had that fight spirit, right? We showed up, hundreds of us. Our youth led a march. Reverend Barber was there. Our youth led a march from the Supreme Court to talk directly to lawmakers at the General Assembly. And it was their voice, and it was their priorities. It was their needs, their demands, their solutions that they were putting forward. And it was an incredible way to start what we knew was going to be a tough year. And this year has proven tough in a lot of different ways that we didn't expect.
Right.
So the election, I know, is on everybody's mind right now. Sholanda's going to talk a little bit about the resources that we have for advocates. But one important thing that we need to stay aware of and be ready to respond to is that attack that I mentioned by the state Supreme Court. We are expecting a ruling from this Supreme Court. And Mr. Thompson, our attorney, we always turn to whenever we need to figure out what's happening in the courts. But we can anticipate that that's not going to be a good ruling. And just like that information should give us fuel for that fire, right? Just because we get a bad ruling, and with this court composition, we're expecting a bad ruling. We always say at every trial that no lawmaker, no judge, no Supreme Court justice has the power to take away what is a constitutionally protected right that every child in North Carolina has because of Leandro.
Right.
Okay? And on that note, because Mr. Thompson has held our hands on many dark moments and times when we definitely felt the weight of this work. And he has been there to lead the way and to remind us what we're fighting for. So on that note, Mr. Thompson, do you have any thoughts you want to share?
Yes. Thank you. You know, I'm going to approach this a little differently today. I'm an attorney, and attorneys ask questions. I want to ask a couple of questions and want you to think about it. The first question is, where do your children spend most of their day, 5 days a week? Hours. School. And that should let and teach us know that really everybody has skin in the game. Right. That's why Leandro matters. That's why education matters. Now, let me ask another question. For those who either work inside the home or outside the home, during those 8 hours that your children are in school or supposed to be in school, what are you doing? Working? Okay. That's why Leandro matters. That's why public education matters. Public education is clearly a part now of the social fabric of our collective community. There's no doubt about it. And because of that, again, everybody has skin in the game. Back in 1988, the citizens of Robeson County went through the General Assembly through their local legislators to have a local referendum put on the ballot. This would have never happened without a referendum. It's interesting that you spoke of referendums because it would have never happened without a referendum. And the referendum was pertaining to the merger of 5 school systems in Robeson County. Now, back in 1988, we had 5 school systems. We had Fairmont, which was a school system, a local school system. Lumberton, a local school system. St. Paul, a local school system. Red Springs, a local school system. These were cities or towns, and they were run by predominantly white people. And then we had the Robeson County school system. That was the communities outside of those local administrative units. And the thing about the city school systems, they were, as I said, predominantly run by whites, and they supplemented. They had a local supplement, a tax supplement. Each one of those cities had a little tax supplement that they would supplement their school system. And that was additional revenue to help fund those systems. Well, you know, we talk about skin in the game. This movement back in 1988 was a movement not just of Black people, not just of Native American people, but there were white people, rural white people who were the brothers and sisters of some of these white folks in these municipalities or towns who finally realized that, hey, they don't really care about us. We out here in the rural part of the county, and our schools systems are falling down. We're not able to provide those local supplements. And so we need to merge the systems in Robeson County so that we can collectively, at least and impactfully so, improve our resources. And so, and it was done by referendum. And the referendum passed. It would have never happened without a referendum, but we did get our local delegation at the time, which consisted of a senator and 3 House representatives to actually introduce the bill in the General Assembly. And because it was supported by the local delegation, the General Assembly passed it. And so we put it on the ballot, and it passed. Now, the thing about it, folks, is that we've had a great discussion on taxes. And the way that school systems are funded, education is funded in North Carolina, is that the local government use their property taxes.
That's right.
The property taxes to support facilities. In other words, the state and the federal government, you get money to them for teacher salaries and things like that. But your facilities, the actual school facilities, are the responsibility of local communities. And when you have a poor tax base like Robeson County and other rural areas, you don't have the money to build the facilities. Now, the local supplements in the cities, they raise those monies to supplement not only teacher salaries, but to also build some facilities. And so the facilities were different in the cities than they were in the county. So that's why it matters. And folks, and that's why it's so important that you understand that when we talk about people paying taxes, if we call a convention of taxpayers, this place would be full because what? First of all, we're all taxpayers. And secondly, you know, the poor people, the people who are impacted most by the failure of the state to fund public education are poor people. And so the lawsuit was brought again in 1994. After we merged, because even after we merged those 5 school systems, we, along with some other rural counties who were suffering the same kind of lack of funding and ability to provide local monies for local facilities and for salaries, came together. They came together, Vance County, Halifax County, Hope County, Cumberland County, and Robeson County, and individuals within that county became plaintiffs in that lawsuit. And so the lawsuit, again, in 1994 has progressed through the court systems, through a number of times, through the local courts, to the Supreme Court, and back and forth, and still, North Carolina has not met its constitutional obligation to fund a sound and basic education, which is what our state constitutional courts have decided. The Supreme Court has decided that every child is entitled to a sound and basic education. And so that's what Leandro is about. It's a lawsuit. I can tell you that I'm an attorney, but you can't solve all your problems in the court system. Right? The court system can be one of your biggest problems. And so we're talking about the case now as it sits in the North Carolina Supreme Court. We're not expecting a favorable ruling, but quite frankly, the Supreme Court doesn't have to rule on this because the legislature is doing the General Assembly is doing the dirty work. Right. Because they're not funding it.
Right.
Supreme Court makes the decision and has ordered the General Assembly to fund public education to a minimum level, and they fail to do it over and over again. So that's basically the context of what Leandro is. But what's more important is when you go out and talk to your people in the community, I think you need to ask them that question and let them think about, you know, where are your children most of the hours of the day? That's how important education is. And quite frankly, not only are they educating your children, they're babysitting your children.
That's right, that's right.
That's right.
Yes, so just as a roundup of everything that has been said here, and I want to share really quickly though, before we close out, just some of the things that I don't want to say privileged to see because it's not a privilege to see it, but that I am privy to, you know, I do have front row seats to. As we heard the years, right, so 30 years is a pretty long time to be asking for something so basic, right? Which is to fund this education system. And as the question was asked, where are your children? 5 days a week for at least 8 hours a day. It's really hard to see, and it's hard to understand why this is not even a partisan issue. You know what I'm saying? Because everyone sends their child to some type of educational institution every week. Like it has to be. So it's not even based on whether or not I am Democrat or whether or not I am independent or Republican. It's just based on what are my children? You know what I'm saying? Like basically, how are they being supported? Some of the things that I do see like all the time. I have children right now who are in grade levels of 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th. Especially I would say 3rd through 6th is the hardest hit grade level right now when it comes to just the fundamentals of reading. Just very basic reading skills. Just really phonics, just really simply like putting words together or understanding like, okay, when I see this, when I see these letters put together to form a word, these are the sounds and this is the word that it needs to produce. I am seeing students who are struggling to understand just your basic mathematic facts. You know, like math is very factual and it's gonna lead to a very factual answer. And I'm seeing students who are having a hard time just putting together or understanding formulas and certain concepts. So me just being one person in Robertson County, I don't really give myself too many pats on the back. But when the parent comes to me, I'm also seeing the struggle there because the parent is like, I can no longer help my child with their homework. I can no longer help or support my child in learning this material, right? And then what ends up happening is our children who are struggling from the academic standpoint, there's a label that is placed on them, And that label goes to them being problem children, behavioral children. They get IEPs, and they try to do emotional evaluations. Later on down the line, those kids will have issues trying to enlist in our army service, in our military services, like things like that affect them now. When I say my kids in the 3rd grade, that's the first testing year. If I have kids who can't read, it not only affects the English portion of their end of grade, middle, VOG, MOG, and EOG, so beginning, middle, and end of grade testing. It not only affects the reading portion, but then they have math problems where they're also required to read. If they cannot read, they can't do the English portion, neither can they do the math portion of that test. What ends up happening? Those test scores go into a system, and then that determines how much funding needs to go into the prison system. Are we understanding like how important it is to go ahead and put the money into education, that we're not supporting a system that is detrimental to their destinies? Okay? Why? That's really why we're sitting here, while we continue to do the work. It doesn't matter who shows up, it's just a matter of like, this needs to get out there. I have kids who can no longer, because the resources aren't being put properly into the public school system, they're being forced to choose other school systems outside of the public school system. Okay, I have parents who literally are forced to put their children into private school systems, and forced because we're not doing the work to support public education. Okay, so why does that matter now? Everybody's about to enter that ballot box, right? Everybody's about to go and they're about to vote. We're about to make some pretty tough decisions here, and it goes beyond who's running for president. That's the thing. We're so focused on what's happening right now with Kamala and Trump, and that is important, but we need to understand that there are responsibilities that are being held locally that we're overlooking because we're so concentrated on what's going on in the White House. I'm not saying to turn your ears and eyes away from Trump and Kamala, but what I'm saying is there are other things on the ballot, and I really do want to stress that really quickly, and we'll close out, right? So, what are the other things that are on the ballot? What else is it that we should be educated about? And what is it that we need to know, right? So we have a governor. I don't know if anybody's seen the ads, but it's really crazy out here in these streets when it comes to who's running for governor right now. We have Josh Down, we have Mark Robinson. We need to know and understand the platforms and what it is that they stand upon, right? There's a huge agenda that is being pushed, but do we understand what that means for our children and what that means for Leandro and where it stands on the ballot? Not only do we have governor, but we also have lieutenant governor. Okay? We need to understand like who's running for these positions and why do I care? Why am I not just gonna allow for somebody, because I am a Democrat or because I am this race, I'm not just gonna allow for somebody to hand me a sample ballot and tell me when you go in there, this is who you better vote for. No, I need to be educated on what this means for my child and what my marks on the ballot mean for my child and where they're going to spend 5 days a week, 8 hours a day. That's what I need to know. Superintendent of the public instruction, we have our General Assembly. That's the House and Senate. We need to understand like who these people are, what it is that they do, and how it is that they influence the decisions that are being made as to where this money is going to be placed. And then locally, this is what I really want to talk about, our county commissioners. We don't have the luxury or the pleasure of, and this is because of the state of our public education system, we don't have the luxury to just say, oh, because this person is such a good friend of mine, I'm gonna go and mark their name on the ballot because I really, really love them and I know they'll help me on the side. No, what does it mean for your child and where they will be spending 5 days a week, 8 hours a day? Like what does that mean? And then some kids even have to go into after school. We're not going to mention that, but there's even longer hours where they'll be spent away from you in the school system. Okay, school board members, we have a civic duty to show up in these school board meetings and to speak up for our children. I sat through The last one I went through was so devastating. I haven't even been back. I gotta go back. But I haven't even been back. Because when they started talking about where the funding was actually going and the programs that was supporting, programs that I have seen fail our children and how they were getting, I won't even say, a lot of money. And I actually witnessed how these programs do not help our children at all, but this is where so much funding is going into. So sitting through those types of meetings and realizing, wait, I don't need to be the only one. At this particular meeting, it was myself and Alice Turner, we sat there. But we need, you guys, you have a right. These people are put into these positions, not just because we like them or because we go to the same church as them or because that has nothing to do with it. It's about, again, where our children, I love that question so much, I never really thought about it, but where our children spend 5 days a week, all those hours within the day. So we need to be there. Show up. If you don't know what to ask, just show up in number. So they'll see that we're serious and we really do mean what we're saying because we really do care about our children. And then you have your judges who are in place, right? But with the school, but let me just read what the school board members, and this information, it can be found on our everychildnc.org. You can go on their website and there's plenty of toolkits, plenty of information. But it says they carry out the educational program and they set local policy according to the parameters determined by the Department of Public Instruction. Okay, so the local policy, that's what our school board members, they're not just in there taking up each position, and a lot of them, they have continued to be voted in. Even though we don't see change, we continue to vote them in year after year. And it's based on being somebody's cousin, somebody's friend, and our children are still suffering. Speak today, okay? Still, today. So again, I hope that we will take the time out to go and visit the website. I don't want to linger on this too long. Go to everychildnc.org. The toolkits are there. We can also see what is old, still owed to us through the Leandro plan. Okay, and we'll go ahead and get to questions, but the last thing that I want to mention that I see from day to day as far as resources, I have a kindergartner that I sat in for with a parent for an IEP meeting just this week. Y'all, school just started in August. This kindergarten has already been from right across the street, the big stuff, I'm not saying the school because it needs to be fixed. This kindergarten has already been suspended twice. Y'all understand that we just started school at the end of August? Do we understand that? We just started school the end of August, and there is a kindergarten, you hear me, that has already been suspended 2 times, twice. So now we're in the process of helping this student to get certain attentions that are needed. He's getting evaluated for his IEPs and getting evaluated for behavior intervention, and the parents are just like, I don't know, what does the school expect from me, but I know what I expect from the school. So those conversations have to be had, but my point is that there are certain things that need to go in. There's not only do the community needs to be supported, not only the parents and the student, but the schools also, they need the support. They need the resources. The thing I love about the mother who was at this meeting, she was just saying, I don't know what else to do. I'm not within, but I do understand that you guys don't have the support that you need either. So we all have to band together, the school systems have to band together, the teachers, the parents, and the students, so that we can see change from those who have the right to give us those resources. Everybody who I just called out, from our judges, all the way up to our lieutenant governor and governor superintendents of public instruction. We'll go ahead and we will take questions and we'll wrap this up. But I really appreciate you guys again for your time. Those are just some of the things that I'm seeing. There's some of the things that really bother me. We have a real increase in kids who are actually being looked at for the spectrum with autism and things of that nature, and our schools are not being trained to really handle them. They're being trained to basically put them outside of population and make them sit in EC classes, and a lot of those kids are a lot smarter than the kids who get to sit in general population, and that's not fair either, okay? So that's just really some of the things I get to see, some of the things that make me upset, that really fire me up, and yeah, so we'll take a few questions and we'll end this and wrap this up. And keep fighting for public education, keep fighting for our kids, keep fighting. I mean, I tell them everywhere I go, I'm from South Lumberton. I don't just say Lumberton, I don't just say Robinson County, but it's South Lumberton because my babies that I see struggling to behave correctly because they don't understand the education that's been placed in front of them. So what else do you expect for them to do? If I don't know how to read and everybody around me is reading, I'm gonna cut up. If I don't know how to do the math work and everyone around me understands it, what am I gonna do? I'm gonna interrupt what they understand. That's what I'm gonna distract them. I'm gonna do those things because I don't understand. So my brain, while they getting all this, no, we need the resources to help those children.
Yeah, I have a question. Listen, first thing, the day that our children go to school, the parents need to meet the teachers. The teachers and the parents should have a relationship. If anything is going on with that child, then the teacher should call that parent. My children went to private school, Catholic school. Then they went to high school at the public school. But we, as parents, that's our obligation to make sure that our children get their homework. I worked and I made sure that my children got their homework. My oldest daughter is a professor, and you know that, Angus. My second daughter, she's got her master's degree in education, and there's no excuse. The parent got to do what they got to do in order for that child to be successful in school. And the first thing they got to do, they got to show them love. That's the first thing. Because if you can work on any job, but you still got to have time for your children. And if you don't have time for them, the streets gonna get them. My little 10-year-old grandson, and I told you this at the beach, his mother didn't have time for him. His father was incarcerated. The counselor called me from Fairmount Middle School. She said, Miss Carter, you need to come to the school. I was on my way somewhere. I turned around and went back. And she said, listen. She sat down and we talked. She said, this need to happen and that need to happen. I said, okay. The child was getting out of mama's car. She trying to drive off and drug the child. Okay? See, some of this stuff comes from the parents. That's why these children cut up. You don't know what's going on in the home. So I told the counselor, I said, listen, call social service right now and let me talk to them. And we did. I told them, I said, rather him be in the system, I would take him because I know that's my blood. I took him, and when his father got out of prison, he came and picked him up, and now this child is an A student.
Amen.
Love is what they're looking for. Absolutely. And that's why they cut up in school, because you don't have time for them. As grandparents, I'm 84 years old, but that child needed me. And I did what I had to do. And now I am proud of him. I talked to him yesterday. His father had ankle surgery. And I said, now, you know, Grandma can't drive up there. I said, but you gonna take care of your daddy? He said, yes, ma'am, Grandma, because you took care of me. How you thought that made me? How do you think that made me feel? So see, that's what we got to do. We got to first get involved with the school, with these children, go to these PTA meetings and all that stuff, and the teachers will see that you care about this child, and then they'll be more lenient towards them. But if we don't care, then they don't care either.
Yeah, one and two. Adrian, go ahead.
Let me just respond to that. And it's so true that parents need to be involved with our children and their education. But I don't want us to miss
Amen.
what this is about.
Right.
This is about the failure to fund education. And notwithstanding the parents' involvement or lack of involvement in education, it takes resources.
It does.
It takes resources to educate a child. And so I'm just not gonna blame parents for failure.
And both of the parents that I mentioned, they are those parents who go to PTA, who show up, both sets of parents that I deal with.
Hey, I'm not gonna blame them without blaming the folks who failed to fund public education. Now, those parents need to show up, not only at school, but they need to show up at the polls and vote and change some of these people that's in private and some of these people that's on these school boards.
That's right, they need to go home.
No, what I wanna know is, I know over here across the street in Knuckles, how is it working out with our kids and the Mexican kids? Are they teaching in the same classroom, or are they separate? How is this going? You know, I don't know how is this going, because my granddaughter talked over there, and she would come home and tell me, things like that. But I wanna know, how is that working out? How is it working out?
Well, I'll answer and then I think Adrian can probably shed a lot of that as well, but they do go into the same classrooms, if that's what you're asking. Some of them, Spanish is their second language, and English is their second language. There is a barrier there. Again, it goes to resources. There should be the certain information that goes out, it's not easily translated. So even when they bring in their own family member as their person who translates for their family, there's things that are missed and there's a huge gap that is created there. We're experiencing another group who does extremely wonderful work for the public schools education system, especially here in Robinson County, is Education Justice Alliance. They just had a meeting on just Thursday night where we're experiencing where certain, I would say, Spanish-speaking families, they're having a hard time with enrollment for their children. For them, and they're being told that they can't enroll their children for various reasons here in Robinson County. And most of it, some of it has to do with homelessness. There's different factors that go into it, but there is a lot of discrimination against that community as well. So not only should our community, as African American individuals, but we need to be championing and partnering with them as well, because they face some struggles just based on location. They have to go to our schools because they're in our district, right? And they deserve support as well. But there are issues there. There are barriers. There are things that are causing them to fall further behind in the education system as well, because the resources are not there. We don't have certain people just come in and say, hey, we understand there's a lot of information for me to translate over to you right now. I sat with a family from Red Springs, I think they were, just last semester. And there were issues with bullying and things of that nature. But what ended up happening was, because this Spanish-speaking teenager had gotten into a fight, it was almost like it was the school's opportunity to go ahead and put the student to the side and put them away, because now you no longer have to deal with handling or supporting them with those resources, right? So it's like, oh, you got in a fight, oh, we can really, okay, bye, thank you, thank you, but you don't understand the frustration of every day being picked at. Because, you know what I'm saying, and all of the things coming towards you just because your family comes from a different country. So other resources need to be put into, and I always say this, there needs to be peer support finances as resources put in as well, so that our kids can understand each other. Because a lot of what happens at the top, where our parents, and people who are above us, ancestors, don't understand other cultures coming in, our kids need to be supported in understanding other cultures coming in as well.
Well, let me ask you this, are they busing them from out in the county or other schools and bringing them over here to Knuckles?
They live here.
Busing them in?
They live here.
They got them mixed in other schools too.
Other schools.
Because
It's
she
not
asked me.
No, these people, no, there's a pocket. Let me tell you something. See, Robeson County has changed. It's, you know, and that's something that we need to, as civic engagers, we need to not just think about just black and white and Native American. The Hispanic community is 10% of Robeson County now. Back in 1994, when this suit was filed, they were less than 1%. Now, you cannot, look, there's 10% of this community that's Hispanic, that's Hispanic. And so, now when we talk about, in fact, when we talk about meetings like this, we need to really, we need to sort of reach out to that community because we don't necessarily understand what they're going through. But I can tell you, if you, now maybe you live in the rural part of community.
I understand.
But there you go, if you live over where I live, you'll see Hispanics, Haitians, and that community is changing. And those people have to be educated just like us.
What I want to know is, how do they mix and how are our kids learning with them? Because she asked me, she said, Mama, come out there one day and just observe and look. So I did. I know, because I done been all over everywhere, that we got to mix and we got to do. But I don't want our kids left behind trying to learn their English when they need to be taught theirs too. And that's what I was concerned
Well, I'm not
about.
gonna
They're in the same
I just cannot, I understand.
I've been military and everywhere. But our kids here, our black kids, I don't want them left behind because we're bringing somebody else. I want them all to be together.
And it still goes back to the obligation.
That they get educated and not having to go through trying to learn their language and when they're not teaching their language. See, I got a lot of over here. I always attend, come to this school and see what's happening to them, thing. Because I
So are you blaming Hispanics?
Yeah, those kids. But
I'm asking you a question. Are you blaming them?
Yeah.
Are you blaming Hispanics for the situation that you described?
Look,
Because we would never have gotten our constitution right.
If you look over
If diverse groups hadn't unified 30 years ago. Because, and we're naming, there is anti-blackness, at the root of the opposition to Leandro, right? But we have to understand, in the eyes of the powers that be and the people that call the shots,
It's
make
all
the
class.
policies, if you're not white, wealthy, and able-bodied, you're all the same. We're all the same, right? So we have
you need a study. I've been through all that. My husband's military. My kids mostly went to school up in New Jersey, and we had the same problems that you have anywhere else. But that's what I'm saying. I don't want our kids left behind.
Yeah. What is our kids though?
They teach us both.
What is our kids? Because I hate to sound
They are
rude,
kids.
but what is our kids? Because now they are our kids.
Too.
Now they're.
So what is our kids? You can't say just because of Knuckles and I'm a black child from South Florida.
That's not the one to say.
But what I'm saying, but what you're saying is that now. That's what you just said to all of us.
Only thing I
And you
ask
cannot
for
just
is how they
stimulate
were
because
teaching.
now our kids are in Davis Heights, Haitian and Hispanic. In Turner Terry, they're Haitian and Hispanic. In Lumbee Homes, they're Haitian and Hispanic. So that's our kids at Knuckles.
I'm saying how
So it
they
benefits
teach
us
it.
all.
That's all.
They are kids.
Together, because our kids don't know their language, and they don't know our
Well, we got to learn
language.
it.
And we're asking for the resources so that everyone can have its own languages to talk to us. It's very important. We need to know English, Spanish, and French at this point because we are a melting pot of Haitians, Hispanics, and Black folks that are in a class. It's outside of race now. It is a class system. So it has gone from being it is a racist situation, but it's about the class that we all sit in. It's our classism. And that's where our economic divide comes into play. And we need the resources to take care of that issue that you are addressing. Go
We
ahead.
didn't come here learning, our people came learning English.
Okay.
We was them at one time.
That's right.
We were them. We can't act like we weren't. Somebody in your family was one of them, and they had to come and learn English.
See, that's not what I'm asking.
But I'm trying to explain to you.
You got the wrong understanding.
You misunderstood what
I
I
have
said.
it all over, everywhere, and mixed together. But you got to, I just want to know how they teach them. That's the only thing I ask you.
And
Look, I love everybody. I'm not Hispanic. Mine is black and white. I came from the white nation. So I see no difference. I'm not Indian, you know. I know where I came from. Nothing was over there was named after our great grandfather, which was the Tulsa and the Ashes. He came from too. But that's not what I'm doing. I'm not against nobody because I love everybody. And that's how I'm gonna be. But I just want to know how they were teaching them in the school. Since she asked me to come, come one day and see. Yeah. That's all I was asking. Was they, how they were teaching. That's all I want to know.
So to answer your question, they're not getting taught. That's what I was saying before, that because of the absence of the corporate tax, because of the introduction of the HB10 bill, because we have not put enough pressure on our legislatures about the EDRO and the monies that's due to us, the resources cannot funnel down so that our children can cross-culturally learn and be able to go and be diverse in the world. Condoleezza Rice, you know who Condoleezza Rice is? Her father was a pastor. When her father was not pastoring, she said that they allowed the Jewish people to worship in her father's church, and they would cross share. She specifically said if her father, and she went to public school. She went to public school, so we know that public school can work. It's just that we all have to get on the same side of the pole of the table and let people know. Jimmy Carter sent his daughter to public school. Ronald Reagan sent his child to public school.
Right.
So we know that public school work. We can name Donnell Thompson went to public school. We know that public schools work. We have to make the legislatures understand and demand that they take the choice. There is school choice. But right now, the private schools have a bigger and better choice, and they're leaving public school out. You have the means, private vouchers are already in existence. I was afforded to go to both public and private school. If you have the means and you want to send your, because you want your child to have a better education, you're going to do what? You're going to try to find a way to send your child to somewhere where they're going to receive the services and the education that they deserve. That's your right as a parent to do that.
Well, that's the problem too, that they're taking the money from the schools.
They're taking the money, right, so we're all saying.
That's the problem.
We're all
That's
saying,
the problem.
we're all saying the same number. And what you can't miss, what you cannot miss is that even though the HB10 is pushing out and saying, if your child, first of all, if your child is born here and they're Hispanic, they have a right.
Absolutely.
To services here.
And they pay taxes.
But they're saying, this new law is saying, and it's, what it is rape. It's economical and educational rape. Because what it's saying is, if your parent is not documented, but you were born here, ICE has the right to tell the sheriff to identify and go into the school, identify your child, go into the school,
follow you home and say, we can detain your mama. That's the same thing that the system, I'm not gonna put black and white, but that's the same thing that the system did.
Oh, you know what I was saying to y'all? Hold on a minute. Y'all got the wrong understanding in the beginning. I just wanted to know how they would teach you.
Well, I'm saying
Look,
that they're not
I've been, when they first opened up the first Head Start, I've been Goldsboro, I worked there. I worked in New Jersey. I worked with white, black, and everything.
I understand what you're talking
Look,
about.
I go to Raleigh, I go to Washington D.C. and march and everything else. But you got the wrong understanding. I'm not against anybody, because everybody got to live.
We don't think you're against, we're saying the same thing. We're saying the resources, she answered the question, but the answer to your question is no. They're not teaching them, they're not giving them what they deserve. That's the answer to your question based on what she's saying. So that's the understanding that we have. We're on the same page there. The purpose of us to understand is that the resources for that to be done and for our children not to be pushed further behind is that we have to make these people who are on the ballot responsible.
Right.
That's the only thing we're saying. So we all have the same general understanding. Your question was very valid. What we're saying is, no, they're not being taught how they should be taught. And it is further setting our children behind. We all saying the same thing.
But I want us to understand, this. This is my relative over here, this is my cousin. And I want you to understand, I listen, and other people listen. And it wasn't just your question that caused me some concern. It was your comments that caused me some concern. I don't want any population in this county that has children in schools to think that we blaming them for our plight, when we ought to be blaming them folks up there for all our plight. And that's all I'm saying.
I agree with the way Mr. Thompson said that. And I also remember, because we are in a place of worship here, right? That solidarity that's necessary, because those immigrants that are fleeing violence, poverty, they're not coming from the Raleighs of Mexico or the Charlotte, uptown Charlotte. They're coming from the Robeson County of Mexico, right? Like, they have been harmed by the same underlying, the same racism and the same system as we are here, right? So I think that's the spirit of that.
All I want to say is one thing. I hear people when they talk about their communal groups and their social groups and their civic groups and their economic groups and the disparity with this and the disparity with that. There's a scripture, and it's not tied in the 66 books that most of you people that are in this room have read. But God says in that particular book, fight oppression, and here's the key, wherever you find it. If the people collectively fight oppression, no matter who it is, no matter what it is, no matter where it is, then guess what? You ain't got to worry about the Indian or the Chinese or the black or the Asian or the LGBTQ or whatever. Even if you can't stand one of those other sides, because you want to stand up and fight oppression, if our people are being oppressed, no matter who they are, because that eliminates, see, when you fight the oppression, it eliminates all of the social and secular and economic and all that. So that's what I'm saying. Even with poor people, fight the oppression. Because when you kill and stop the oppression, it makes no difference who it is. In other words, I'm going to stand against you. I don't care. This is why our young people in their age group hear adults talking, including parents, and they go in one ear and turn around and go right out. You know why? Because we as parents and adults do not fight the oppression that the young people are being subjected to. And I keep coming to these meetings. I've been coming since '95. I hear people talk about what we need to do, but I don't hear a collective effort of how we're going to fight this oppression. Fight the oppression. Fight the oppression. If it's spousal abuse, if the community comes together and fights spousal abuse, You won't have it in your community. It won't be prevalent. Child abuse. If you come together. But because we won't do that, it's because we still got these social problems.
But you need to know who the oppressor is.
And I think most people do.
Yeah, I think it's clear.
And a lot of those oppressors, before we can get to the big dog, a lot of those oppressors are sitting right beside us.
Whoa, talk to me.
Whoa!
Tell it now, preach it, tell
And the reason I know because I've been to too many committee meetings and stood up like this, and by the time I got home, my house was surrounded by police.
Now, tell it. Tell the truth.
Are there any more Q&A briefity?
This is what a Q&A session on.
Right, this is the space that it should be.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about it.
Debate in good flavor. Yes, everybody here is important. I'm learning that everybody here is very much important. Well, it's time for us to wrap it up, and we would like to thank everybody for their comments, their participation, your presence. You can find, she'll tell you.
Oh, well, I was just gonna say, if you want to go back, the information can be found on everychildnc.org. That's gonna go in, and what's the second budget?
NC budget.
NCbudget.org. And we want just for you guys to have these resources beyond. We will be releasing clips of information that you all will be able to share. YTC, if you'll go and look up the YTC, we have a YouTube page, and if you will also go to, and I'll have Adrian tell you what Seeds of Hope website is, but if you will also go on Facebook and look up You Take Charge, it's a very new page, just go and please like it. And share it out to your friends. There are some important videos that we have shot with some of our youth, and we will continue to shoot and also just educate them on civic engagement.
So we just wanted to know, in this type of setting and environment, would you all like to do this again? This was very powerful, because it is going to reach the masses because we chose to switch over. So your participation actually helped the conversation reach further. It's going to go on Facebook, it's going to go on Instagram, and we're hoping that if you see it, you share it, and you put those comments into it to make us all better understand the next steps, and that's where I want to go to. If you want to do this again, we will set up another one, these live conversations. We expect the same faces because you all added to the power. And the next steps, it will be for the next step, the next continuous steps. Yeah, definitely. We're gonna vote.
Wait.
What do you say? What do you say?
We got to protest.
We're gonna protest.
We got to pray.
We're gonna pray.
And we got to vote.
And we're gonna vote.
Okay.
And some places you know how to pray with one eye open.
So on behalf of,
All right, cousin, you better. That's my cousin.
on behalf of Seeds of Hope, CDC, South Florida Development Association, we are participating and funded by a nonpartisan group. Every child is nonpartisan, meaning that we listen and favor conversations between all parties, and we do not promote any party. As well as the North Carolina Budget and Tax Center, they sponsored this event, a nonpartisan group. They know the numbers and the statistics and the dollar. They can break the dollar down. If you ever have any questions about demographically where your money goes, you can reach out to the North Carolina Budget and Tax Center. So with all hearts and minds, we thank y'all for your participation. We wanted Shonda to stand up and say a few words.
No, you did go up in a race or something. Yeah. She didn't ask the wrong question, did she?
Hey, I just want to say real quick, I am Deshauna Hooper, born and raised right here in South Wilmington, right down the street. So Robinson County, I know it very well. I just want you all to know, Deshauna Hooper, North Carolina House. I do know the concerns here, that's why I've been coming to these meetings, and I'm on your side. Vote Hooper for House, starting next week, early voting October 17th. Thank you.
Ms. Hooper, did you have any issues that you wanted to raise? We know education, because you're here. Yes, sir. We know education.
Yes, I am for education. I was for the League and Growth, and that is one of my platforms. Once I get into the office in Raleigh, I want to start where it left off and fight. Another one of my concerns is affordable housing. I don't like what's going on. I want to push that issue. Women's right, of course, we're in the church. Every issue that y'all talked about with education, I understood. And I have said that what you said was the same, because I've been in that classroom before. So I know what it is in the classroom. I taught at Pembroke Middle School for 7 years. So I know that side, the education side. I know the parent side, Ms. Lois, so I know dealing with both. My children actually told me I was nicer when I stopped teaching. Because it's a struggle, you know, like you said, you got to show them love. And then, and as a younger parent back then, I had to come home and show my children love. So it's a battle because you see what's going on in the school system. Then you're trying not to do the same thing when you get home to your own children. So I know the battle. I just want to commend all of y'all, especially Seeds of Hope. I can't make everything, but when I do, whether I was running or not, I would try to come because the same fight y'all fighting, that's what I believe in. So I just want you to know, I don't know what I can say, what I can't say, so I'm trying to keep it brief. But education is the first for me. Just like Adrian said, a lot of good people came out of public school. Look around the room, y'all came out of public school. You know, the Bible says you can work for the least of them, you can work for what? The higher ups. I am a servant leader, I believe in that. You got to serve the people first. What Pastor was saying, I agree totally about it. So that's who I am, and I feel like when you have God here first in your life, the decision that you gotta make sitting before you is very important, because you gotta be able to be led by God, and you gotta be able to hear, you gotta be unbiased.
Right.
You can't have a special interest group in your pocket. This is people's livelihood, it's my livelihood. And on my flyers, I got your fight, I got your rights, our fight, meaning together. And I understood what everybody was saying, but just like you said, gentlemen, Pastor, it is accountability across the room, and I believe in that. It has to be both ways. And I commend you, Shalonda, because I know wholeheartedly where your heart is. And South Wilmington, children as a whole, is so blessed to have somebody like you that take the time out. I know she's a small business owner now, but I know she was doing stuff for free. And let me tell you, so we in Rockland County, people don't do stuff for free. It's got to be really in your heart. The people that came down from Raleigh, I just want to say thank you. I don't know your names, but thank you for driving down and being important to this program. And yes, Adrian, to answer your question, you do need to continue this here. This is very important. I think if it wasn't doing right before election time, you might have had more people because there's so many events going on. That's why I was late. But continue this, continue your fight. You have more people for you than against you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you.
You're all right?